Great. So I don't want to keep you waiting any longer. Councilmember Hansen will be here shortly. He was just getting out of council, so he was kind of rushing here, but he should be here any minute, so I'll let him introduce himself and say a few words when he gets here. But in the meantime, I'm Lisa Murawski. I'm your school board member for Area 1. That's the area we're in right now, from Southland Park up through Midtown Land Park and Curtis Park. Really pleased to have you here tonight. This is an issue that I feel strongly about as a public official now, as of last November, and as a mom. We live just 2 blocks from here. I have my sons and my husband in the back as well, so we're also here as community members just like you who really care about this issue in our neighborhood. I think with that, I will turn it over to kick us off with our city traffic, public works, traffic engineering team. Is that right? Yes. I'm ad-libbing here. Great, thank you.
Hi folks, my name is David Donlon. I'm the interim city traffic engineer. And I'm here with my team, Eric Kuhn, Jennifer, Donlon, Wyant. Eric does investigations of this area, and Jennifer does everything for us. She's in the bike stuff, a lot of alternative modes. Vision Zero is her specialty. Tonight, I've been asked to speak about what we've done at Sutterville and Mead. We had an incident there. And what we've done a couple weeks ago is we've made some changes at the intersection. What we've done is we've restriped or refreshed the intersection, painted it white. We'd also put in raised pavement markers because they were sort of old. We also added some striping in advance of it, as well as some signs which say yield here to pedestrians. We've also removed parking on both approaches to enhance visibility, put in some no parking signs. We've also put in some advanced pedestrian warning signs on both approaches. So that's what we've done. We've also looked at other items. We did do some traffic counts. No.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry for being a little late. We had a council meeting that ran long, and I actually left before the last item so I could be here. Steve Hansen, your council member. You all met Lisa Murawski, our school board member. I just want to thank you for coming out tonight. I hope that was said. It's very important to us for a variety of reasons that our streets are safe, that people feel comfortable walking, biking, that their kids also feel safe, that people with limited mobilities feel safe. And so tonight what we've tried to do is really bring some of our city experts, and you know, they all play different roles. I just learned that maybe not everybody's introduced themselves. But one of the things that we don't want to do is just always be reactive. We want to also be proactive. And so one of the things that we helped do, I led the charge to implement a program called Vision Zero, and it's probably what Jennifer is going to talk about. Jennifer Donlon Wyant here, she is the head of our active transportation programs. She is very much the lead for the city in making sure that our streets are safe from a pedestrian and bike standpoint. Eric, did you introduce yourself already? Eric Kuhn is David introduced you. I'm not sure who this gentleman is because I didn't get to meet him beforehand.
You should have a uniform on the motorcycle.
Oh, yes. He's one of our traffic officers. We've got our captain here, and looks like lieutenant? No, sergeant. I can't see either. It's been a very long day at this council meeting. One of the things that I'm just going to set for you to think about is that, and Jennifer can explain this, but when we look at roads, we look at 3 E's. So it's appropriate we're here in one of the school's facilities. One of the E's is for engineering. How the road is built. Does it create unsafe conditions the way it's designed? Many of our roads in Sacramento were designed 50 years ago or more. And at that point, so they may not have had sidewalks, there may not have been crosswalks, there may not have been a mindset that people would like to get out of their car. Some of our roads are newer and they're dealing with a lot more volumes of traffic than they used to have, right? And so how does our city street design adapt to the challenges? The second E is really about enforcement, and we have been talking a lot with our city PD, our chief and deputy chief, about how we bring back some of the tools we used to have to make sure that people know if they violate the law, speeding, running red lights, texting while driving, etc., that there's a consequence. And during the recession, many of you know the city had to lay off officers. We've been working hard to restore that, but it takes about 1,000 applicants into the city to get one person out of the academy. We have added officers every year, but one of the biggest challenges is many of our officers were hired 25 years ago, and they're retiring because they're of the generation. There's a huge amount that were hired and are now retiring. And so when we look at enforcement, we're trying to find new creative ways to help with enforcement. The 30, and I hear there may be as many as 7 of these, so I only stick to 3, is really about education. How do we, as users of the road, whether we're on foot, on bike, in a car, how do we interact with each other? What are the opportunities for, keeping each other accountable? What are the best practices for whether it's defensive driving or being a pedestrian, how to cross and where to cross? And those are some of the things that we learn, and I think the city wants to be, for the region, at the forefront. Our region's a dangerous region if you want to get on the roads. A lot of people who aren't used to pedestrians, a lot of people who aren't used to crosswalks and bikes and things like that. So people come into the city, and they're not all people from outside the city. Sometimes the enemy looks us in the mirror on a daily basis because we're in a hurry. And we have to figure out how to adapt from a city standpoint, our policies, our funding, partner with our schools, particularly on safe routes to school. But we have very limited resources in the end to make some of those very expensive changes. So we look to state programs to fund them. We look to whether there is any general fund available, and general fund largely goes to parks, police, fire as the priority. Those are our 3 principal general fund departments, but we are able to occasionally get resources for other things. A lot of the road maintenance money that's coming into the city, and maybe I'll finish with this and turn it back over for a second to the panel to do the rest of their introductions. A lot of it comes in through what is known as Measure A. It was a half-cent sales tax approved by the voters in 2004, took effect in 2009. That funds some capital projects, road maintenance projects, and then SB1, which was a state program passed a couple of years ago, that is gas tax money that helps us when we have to resurface, when we have to restripe. But the amount of needs for a city as large as ours that has dangerous roads, and if you look at the dangerous segments in the city, many of them, and we've identified them through the high injury network, I'm seeing Jennifer's probably talking points, but those end up being in poorer communities. It doesn't mean that communities that have more resources don't have dangerous roads, but one of the things that looking around the room tonight, is that you're able to advocate for yourselves. We're able to advocate together because often it's a team process. When we get the school board, the city council, you as a public, it's very hard to resist us from a staff standpoint. Should ask the city manager how that goes some days. So it's really important that we think about what we need, how we're going to get it, but this is a holistic challenge going on throughout the city. And it's important to me that we fix our streets, that we fix our crossings, but ultimately too, there is a bigger challenge here that we're all grappling with. My council colleagues, they would love to have communities that are willing to step forward like you do and ask for the things that they need and partner with us. But let's use that smartly as we design safe routes to school programs, help implement Vision Zero, and really do what we want for our neighborhood, for neighborhoods throughout the district and throughout the city. So I'll say that briefly. David, had you finished your update on what was? Okay. So that's that. I'm gonna let the other people just do quick introductions. Eric, you got introduced. Maybe I'll hand it to Jennifer.
Hi everybody. As you might have gathered, my name is Jennifer, and I'm the Transportation Planning Manager for the City of Sacramento. Many things fall under my umbrella, including active transportation like walking and biking, as well as our Vision Zero program. And I want to communicate to you that traffic safety is at the forefront of the work that we do in Public Works. We adopted our Vision Zero action plan in August of 2018. And essentially what that is the city and the council committing to working towards zero traffic fatalities and serious injuries by 2027. It's incredibly ambitious, but it's incredibly important that we work towards having safer streets. You might have heard reference about the challenges that we face in Sacramento. We're 170 years old and have a lot of older streets that weren't designed for the uses that we want now. The State Office of Traffic Safety has ranked us #1, and we actually want to be number last in regards to traffic safety. We have challenges with speeding and drunk driving, and these are things that we're working towards addressing. I just want to quickly highlight some of the things we are doing in Public Works so that you know our commitment to traffic safety. One is having our Vision Zero action plan that we adopted. We immediately thereafter went after the 5 worst corridors in the city to work to improve them. They are Marysville Boulevard, El Camino, Broadway, Stockton, Lower Stockton, and Florin Road. So we're committed to identifying those issues and working towards improving them. We also immediately committed to looking at our 20 worst school areas. We're in that study right now of looking at schools near the most challenging streets in the city and working to address school safety around those. That report should be coming out soon. It does not include the schools in this immediate area, but I wanted to ensure that our commitment to school safety is of utmost importance. We also reduced our speed limits in school zones to 15 miles an hour where eligible. That is 225 corridors in the city, near 115 schools. We brought it down from either 30 or 25 miles an hour down to 15 miles an hour. And then that other E, which is education. While we don't do in-school education, we do offer free urban biking and scooting classes every month. We're trying something new. We're teaming up with the libraries, and so we're actually taking it on the road and bringing it to libraries throughout the city. And then, of course, we're applying for grants. So if anybody here is from the Freeport Boulevard Traffic Safety Group, we applied for a grant for Freeport Boulevard and Northgate to really look at that and address how we can improve traffic safety and economic development and really reflect the community interest there, as well as looking at our 6 through 10 worst corridors, because again, we are very committed to improving traffic safety and doing what we can. But as the council member noted, the general fund doesn't come to us, so everything we do, or nearly everything we do, is grant funded. So we're moving forward with that. So this is just a quick overview on our Vision Zero efforts. I'm going to turn it over to the police department to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Good evening, Detective Corey Johnson, and I am from the Major Collisions Investigation Unit at the Police Department. For the past 3.5 years, I was a motor officer, so I did traffic enforcement, and I was assigned the Bike and Pedestrian Safety Grant. When I had that grant, one of my main focuses was schools, working on the 3 E's of traffic enforcement. I would go to schools, conduct enforcement in front of the schools, educate the people, and then I would always contact traffic engineering. Eric, I contacted him all the time about fixing issues in front of schools. Yeah, we got a lot of that stuff. Part of what the traffic enforcement unit does right now is what I do is I handle fatal collisions and hit and run investigations. And we also do traffic callouts as well. So if there's a pending fatal or if there's some kind of a serious injury type accident, they will call our unit out and we come out and we use traffic surveying equipment to shoot the scene, basically what it is, and conduct an investigation. So we also have 6 now traffic enforcement officers, so there's 6 on a motorcycle. Up until about a month ago, there was only 3, 4, and one is coming over to our major collisions unit, so there are 6 traffic officers. That is 6 for the whole city. Okay? So typically, when it comes to schools, what they do is they will, each day, they will be in front of a school during pickup and drop off, and then they go to other areas and they will conduct enforcement as well. So it just depends on what area of the city they work. So they have a rotation on how they go. So unfortunately, we are not in every part of the city every day. If we get certain complaints as well, we may change that course of action and go and work that certain complaint or certain issue and see if there's something else that we can do too. A lot of times we get speeding complaints in front of schools, in front of various neighborhoods and such, and we go out there, and a lot of times what we find is we'll be out there with our LiDAR or radar guns, and we'll see some violators, and the speed limit will be 25, and the cars will come by at 25, 30 miles per hour. Yes, 30 is over the speed limit, but sometimes it's not super egregious, and it's not something that we might always pull everybody over for. And every once in a while, we'll get people that will come out and be like, "Ah, you see that car? How it's going so fast?" And I was like, "He was going 26 miles per hour." So we work on those issues, and if there is speeding issues, we work on those as well. If we find that there is some kind of an issue like that, and yeah, this place is, they're having numerous speeders, I send it over to traffic engineering. We request information from traffic engineering, and then they'll do their job into checking and seeing what they can do in regards to the engineering part of it as well. The other thing that I did as a motor officer is I conducted all kinds of education at schools. I did bicycle rodeos. I think I did 2 bicycle rodeos here. Throughout the few years, I did bicycle and pedestrian safety presentations where I'd come into the school, we'd have an assembly, and we talk about being safe pedestrians and safe bicyclists and how to get to school. I think over the past 3 years, I gave away $13,000 in helmets to kids. And I still have some left, and I still have the ability to give some of those away too. So it just depends on some of the community events and stuff that we get to go to as well. Anything else that I can think of off the top of my head? I know some of the things that you guys were looking for are some of the statistics that we deal with, and I have some of those. So this.
Why don't we finish the introduction?
Oh, yes. Want to? Yeah. This is Sergeant Brown. He's the school resource officer. Sergeant.
Good evening. Sergeant Justin Brown. I've been with the department for, 19 years now.
Don't retire.
Not trying to. Been with the school resource unit for the last couple of school seasons, and so I supervise a set of officers. So you guys probably recently heard that we acquired 3 officers, or authorized for 3 officers to serve in and around our schools. The majority of the service will be floating around the district. So we have 75 to 77 schools, 46,000 students, 10,000 staff. Our main responsibility is the safety of students and staff. And so from engagement to enforcement, that's what my guys do. But if you can imagine, 3, our resources will be a little bit limited. But we will provide the highest level of services possible, and my guys go above and beyond with their levels of service. And so we do a little bit of traffic education as well, where we can. Where Corey can't meet, one guy, he and his team, we try to fill in. So you might see my school resource officers maybe parked in front of your school. If we have some spikes in maybe speeding around the school, we might come and engage with students, educate parents as well, but just more of a visible presence. But as you can imagine, we get a lot of calls for service to our unit, and so we have to respond throughout the district, city and county. And so if you have any questions, you can always get a hold of me. I'm the sergeant, supervise the whole program, and hopefully we grow pretty quick here to get adequate resources for the district.
Captain?
Do I need the acronym for you hear me?
Yes. It's always good to use the microphone.
I'm fairly loud. Normally I do whatever the council member says, but this will leave me
For people that have limited hearing,
all right.
Yes.
All right, is that all right? Okay, so I am probably the least important police officer in the room, so I'm going to try and eat up as little time as possible so that the important people can talk. But I'll explain a little bit about who I am. So my name's Adam Green. I am the captain for our South Command. So what that means is I am responsible for all police operations south of Highway 50 and west of 99. So basically the Broadway corridor down to the city of Elk Grove. So it's a fairly large area. So in my command, I have 4 lieutenants. I'm fortunate here tonight is Lieutenant Vance Chandler. So I'll brag about Vance for a second. Vance is one of my closest friends. I've had the very good fortune of working with him my entire career. He's absolutely one of the best lieutenants in our organization. So why that's important to you is because all the lieutenants in my command are assigned geographical areas. So Vance is the lieutenant responsible for your neighborhoods. He has basically Broadway south to Florida, essentially. So a really large area. And I can't say enough about him. You're very fortunate to have him. So ultimately, Vance is responsible for kind of overseeing everything that occurs law enforcement-wise in that community. Vance is normal, so that is his geographic responsibility. His normal assignment is as a patrol watch commander on swing shifts. So he oversees during the swing shift hours on his work days everything that's going on in the city. And then in part to that, he has that geographic responsibility also. So I won't go too much farther than that because there's a lot of people to talk, and then I'll be happy to answer specific questions that come up about our command or my role or what we do as a command to manage traffic stuff.
Thank you, Captain. Thank you, Captain. Thank you, everyone. So I want to get to questions. That's the most important thing, but because we started a little bit haphazardly, I wanted to center us around why we're here. And we're here because a young girl on her way to Cal Middle was hit by a car. And Alena Wong, and I believe Talyn is here, her mother and brother? Oh, okay. Father, Kevin, is here. Congratulations on your genetics. In what you don't realize is when these incidents happen, quite how we respond as your council office. And so part of what we were trying to figure out were first, what happened? And so really keeping in mind that these are people's lives, and I hear your daughter's doing better, and I think in a minute we'll give you a chance to say something if you want. But I take these things very seriously because of the work I've done around biking, walking. We want a city where people feel comfortable out of their car. And so we instantly, the captain shared with me the information. We tried to get as much details as we could that day. That night, we had a city council meeting, much like tonight. I asked the city manager to look at what we were doing because the council's repeatedly asked for more traffic enforcement. The chief, for a variety of reasons, doesn't have enough officers for that, but I reprioritized that, and other council members stepped up to say we need to prioritize traffic enforcement. Measure U is passed. You know, the city's doing a lot of things, and we need to figure out ways to be more efficient and more effective with these resources. That's not really as much on the day-to-day operations, which most of these officers represent, but it's on the city council and the city manager and the mayor to make sure that's constantly a priority. And I want to talk about how I'm approaching that. But then the next morning, and this is something that will happen, if you have a fire in our district, a lot of times you'll see me out there that day or the next day talking to people, because that's kind of what this job is really about, making sure that people in need, that we're responsive and that we're doing what we can. So the next morning, well, late that night, I texted our staff and said, we need to meet out there at the time this accident happened, the very next morning. Because we had gotten complaints before that I sent to Public Works to look at this particular crosswalk. This segment of Sutterville, some days is good and some days it's bad. We know that it's very long ways from Freeport to Land Park Drive, and this is one of the few places where people believe it's safe to cross. In fact, part of those prior complaints we got were why there was this flashing beacon there. We can talk about that overall, but I think, and some of you may have seen us out there, I heard that there were people who reported our presence to others. But we talked to neighbors and people who were crossing, and one of the things we heard consistently is people didn't feel safe crossing. And so Dave Adroslin, who's here, who is one of our he's our main traffic engineer right now, is that right, Dave? Yeah. He and his team were there, and basically they looked at immediate improvements they could make. And those are some of the ones that he repeated out. Because we identified some things that were deficient with that particular intersection. The next big part of this process is going to be, what are the permanent improvements that need to be made to support the operation of William Land Park, which we know some days there might be no one crossing right there that are going to rugby or soccer, but on a Saturday morning, there's going to be a lot of people crossing there. Or if there's an event, there's going to be a lot of people trying to access the park from that particular crosswalk. So the long-term improvements, I think that's part of where we are. There's been some initial improvements, and we want to figure out what we can do over the long term. But I also, and everybody knows, hopefully our school board member, Lisa Murawski, who's here with her husband and family, because they live in the neighborhood as well. But we want to figure out how we partner with our school district, not just Sac City Unified, but the other ones. And so I made a request of the city manager that we add in Jennifer's team, she probably doesn't even know this yet, a Safe Routes to School coordinator. We've been slowly building Jennifer's team every year, but the schools, particularly Sac City Unified, I'm sorry to say, but they just don't have the resources that they need for such a large urban school district. And so, here Lisa, why don't you cut me off?
No, I did just want to address that piece and kind of apologize for the district staff not being able to be here to support this event tonight, but we are hiring a director of school safety, and that person is coming on very, very soon here. So I look forward to being able to follow up with that person and the Safe Routes to School coordination under that person as to how we can work together. In the meantime, I am very, very happy to be an engaged partner on moving forward with the city and council in our neighborhoods.
Thank you, Lisa. She clearly, in the schools, can help us with the E for education, ensuring that, and Jennifer runs some great classes teaching people how to bike and how to engage, and we want to see how to bring maybe those into our school setting. But the city is responsible for the other two E's, the engineering and the enforcement, and the school district can't help with that. So that's part of why I wanted to bring this kind of unique group of folks together tonight. And now I'd love to hear your questions. And Talyn, Kevin, right? If you guys want to say something briefly, I'd welcome it. Thank you for being here, and I'm glad to hear your daughter's doing better.
First of all, I just have a few thank yous. Thank you, Board Member Murawski and Councilmember Hansen, for organizing this meeting. Thank you for such a swift response to improve the safety of that intersection, to do everything you could. And thank you, Detective Johnson. Some of you might not know that Detective Johnson gave Alena that helmet, the one she was wearing, when she was hit by the car. Thank you, Detective Johnson. And thank you for reaching out with your bike outreach program. They want to replace Alena's bike. See, aren't they awesome? With your 3 E's, I just want to, there are 3 E's, and the education part was there. The Sutterville PTA has done an excellent job with their Bike to School weeks, which is why Detective Johnson was here to give Alena that helmet, because hers was worn out. And they continue to make, to teach kids how to be on the streets, and every kid that's on the street makes it safer for every other kid. So thank you, Sutterville PTA. And and I don't think it was a failure of enforcement either, because as far as I know, the young man driving that car was not speeding. He was not on his cell phone. He was just driving his car. And my daughter was crossing at a marked crosswalk with a signal. And so I think in this case, it was really engineering that was the failure. And so I know I talked to you on the phone, and as far as I understand, you can't do much more until you finish your traffic study, right? And so my question for you is, how do we pass it? Because we have all of these people here, and if we need to organize to drive slow on Sutterville, we'll all drive 25 miles an hour, we will do that. And if we need to organize to get thousands of people to cross at the crosswalk so that their lives count, we will do that. And whatever we need to do to pass that, that's what we need. Like, the immediate concern right now is that even still, after the improvements you've made, I crossed there, and I had my giant cargo bike with a kid on the back, and I pressed the pedestrian signal, and 5 cars went by before anyone stopped. And so it's not there yet. The engineering part is still our failure. And you're right that not every section of the city has this sort of support, but we do. And so we will use it. And so if you'll just tell us how to pass it, we will pass it. If we need to raise the money to put the light in so that you can save the money for neighborhoods that need it, we will do that. So thank you for all that you have done, and help us know how to fix the rest. And thanks all of you for coming.
Thank you, Talyn. Thank you, Kevin. Nobody can say the way that you said it. Nobody can center the family the way that you can raise it. I want to just add two things. I think you're right about the other two E's, but they're still part of our architecture, right? And there are a lot of communities where even with a light, people blow the light. So we still need those other two E's for a variety of reasons. But I think the goal of tonight, let people ask a lot of questions. I have been successful, and I continue to work to be successful at getting unique resources for our district. And so one of the things that I'm going to be working with our staff on, other than overall enforcement, and we're working with the city manager at mid-year to add some things that can help the police department with enforcement. I can go down that path if you want to hear about that, but that's going to be a citywide effort. I mentioned getting another person in Jennifer's shop to make sure we are looking at these routes to school and prioritizing safe routes to school overall. But I think the third thing is really just very specific about this crossing. It does need a stoplight of one form or another, but it needs a stoplight. And there's a variety of ways. There's a variety of ways we can accomplish that. A lot of times, and this is where you'll hear what I hear, is there are a lot of places that people want stoplights. And there are a lot of places where the cost of that can be $500,000 up to $1 million, depending on the infrastructure that's needed to support it, the engineering, and all those other things you heard about. But in most of those places, we don't have William Land Park across the street. And so one of the big questions will be, will the Land Park Volunteer Corps, will LPCA, will the neighborhood support us if we identify resources from the Land Park Trust to help build that crossing? That, I'm not supposed to say where the money's coming from. But people who use the park for events, they pay a fee. We use that to build trails, to restore parts of the park. And so there is potentially a source because of this unique asset we have, which is William Land Park, in the fact that people who use the park pay fees that go into restoration, maintenance, and long-term needs of the park. So if we collectively, as a community, decide that this doesn't work anymore. If we collectively decide that that's a priority for the William Land Park needs, then we are going to have to try to find a way to answer that question. And the only other option is what Crocker Riverside has done, which is they've raised money through the parents to have a crossing guard in certain places.
They had that since 1957.
And they've apparently had it, according to Pinky, since 1957, 3 years after my mom was born. I don't think that those stopgaps are always the best. So because there's such a... That's okay. It was probably me. I probably did something. My point is that there are options, and if we can work together and agree, then there's always going to be a creative solution to figuring out how to answer this particular challenge. And now, maybe not everybody will agree. Maybe some people do not want a stop sign or a stop light. Excuse me. A stop sign is much cheaper, but people definitely, I've heard, do not want a stop sign. They probably don't want more speed bumps. We have options for putting in pedestrian islands in the middle. You know, those things like in Midtown where people can stand and feel safer, although those get hit a lot of times by the same drivers that Jennifer was talking about who are speeding. So we'll have to figure out what the best intervention is. But if what the community wants is some kind of controlled crossing, then I think that's the challenge we have to try to rise to meet. Money is a secondary issue of it, but it's a very important issue for overall how to implement it. So I'm going to go to questions, But I wanted to leave you with that, and I'll try to acknowledge people for questions. And after you've asked your question of whichever expert, Lisa, are you available for questions? Lisa's available, and everybody else here. So, ma'am, I saw your hand first, and then we'll come over here to you, sir, and you, ma'am, and then we'll go from there. I don't want to. Here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Judith Hansen, and I've lived on Sutterville since July of 1973. So I have a lot of experience with traffic on that street and that intersection. I'm the second house east of Park Ridge towards Mead. And one of the biggest problems that's not talked about is the sun. There's nothing we can do about that. The sun was, I think, a major factor in your daughter's accident. In all the years I've lived there, the vast majority of accidents have been car-on-car. People running into parked cars, people rear-ending, especially from about 3 o'clock until 5:36 every afternoon. The traffic going west on Sutterville is backed up to Mead and beyond, almost to Francis. If we were to put a stop sign, a red and green light stop sign at Sutterville, the cars backed up going east, the air pollution would be untenable, in my opinion. I'm adamantly against a stop sign. There are other things that can be done, I believe.
Thank you, Judith. I'm going to turn it over to our team, but when we went out the next morning, at that very time, the sun was directly down the street, and so I don't think that that's anything that I'm going to debate, but I do think that there are ways to have a pedestrian-activated light that would only turn if needed. And so I'll turn it over to our experts here who would like to answer the question of will it increase air pollution and how do we manage overall traffic? Because this is one of the other things with the traffic, with the project on I-5, the Freeport Road diet. We are going to be having to work to make sure that Land Park, Riverside, and Sutterville all function appropriately because people are cutting through from 99 to 5, and Sutterville is one of the main ways that they're trying to do it.
Thank you. Well, we did some traffic counts and we looked at the number of vehicles on Sutterville. There's about 15,000 vehicles a day. To put in a stop sign would probably not be the best thing, especially if there is no reason to stop for anyone exiting the park or on Mead. So a stop sign would not be beneficial. We are looking at all of our options, whether it's a full traffic signal or something different, a pedestrian hybrid beacon. We are also looking at options such as perhaps a refuge island in the middle. I'm also considering two bulb outs in lieu of a refuge island. I just need to kind of resolve. A bulb out is what's a good way to explain it?
A bulb out is a way to shorten the crosswalk, so it's a shorter distance to get across. It's sort of like the island idea, where you have to get across one lane, and then you're safe, and then you can get across another. It gives people a chance to just shorten the crosswalk.
So
is that a good way to?
That's a good way to do it. We found a new traffic engineer right here.
Life after council.
Basically, it's to reduce the distance that the pedestrian has to go across. But there are some challenges. You just don't do these things. We're looking at drainage, bus stop. There's 2 bus stops there as well, and making sure that whatever we do, vehicles can turn, out of both streets. And we know there are buses or large vehicles that turn into the park. So right now we're looking at all of our options right now to see what's the best thing that we can do.
Thank you, David. Anybody else want to add to that? No? Okay, you, sir, were next, and then you, ma'am, and then who? I see you in the black, and then you in the back.
Hi, thank you. My name is Joel Guzman. I live in Land Park. My son used to ride this bike to this school. He now goes to Cal Middle School. I think you kind of answered my questions. I'm going to ask about the red light, if that was something that was that a conclusion by the engineers, or was that something that people have been asking for?
Red light?
You were asking us, stoplight, sorry, yes. Yeah, if that was just something that's being asked by popular demand, or if it's been evaluated as that's the best option.
That's a great question. I'll turn it over for the specifics to our team. We've gone through, as you can imagine, representing downtown and Midtown, I get a lot of traffic requests. We do a lot of traffic investigations with the team for various things. One of the things that is important to know is, particularly like for a stop sign, there are intersections that for 10 years we've tried to get stop signs at. And one of the things we have to do is figure out when they're the busiest and when there are the most conflicts. Because under state law, you can only do a stop sign under certain circumstances. And so we sort of ruled out stop sign as a viable option because of the flow primarily being across Sutterville and not necessarily at Mead, because there's not as much cross traffic. There's turning traffic and you have pedestrians and bikes. Except, I think you'll see probably, I don't know what they call it in the traffic world, but you'll probably see spikes of activity on the weekends or for events, where people are trying to access the park, and getting across that intersection can be very hard, whether you're on foot, on bike, or in a car. And so one of the things that comes up is, what is the appropriate way to do that without impeding the rest of the flow? And so that's why they made these initial improvements, which is repainted the crosswalk, the pedestrian signs to signal in advance. They added the beacon, the flashing beacon with federal dollars. That was where that came from. And so the next question is there a way to stop the cross traffic to allow the pedestrian to cross? Short of a light, I think that what David mentioned is the bulb out or a pedestrian island in the middle. That is the alternative. So there's not a ton of traffic engineering solutions. We finally got stop signs at like 20th and K and 20th and Capitol on R Street corridor, but it took a while because volumes had changed, behavior patterns had changed, but people largely have embraced those. On the flip side, as a collector, is that what this is called, or is this arterial? They won't put speed bumps or other things on an arterial. It's too important for police and fire and other things. So those kind of things also get ruled out. So there's not a lot of options, as I understand it.
That's correct.
Okay, this is like my quiz for my traffic engineering job. So I think we're looking at, and we've seen these type of signals where they primarily give the go-ahead to the people in the east-west direction here. But let's say you pull up, it can turn what is right now the red stop sign into a yellow flashing and allow people to proceed across while the others have a stop. So there's a variety of ways to do it, and they're going to know that technology better. I don't think a speed board is going to change it. I don't think, there's probably a lot of things short of that's going to change it. So that's why I think that's the predominant intervention that's being talked about beyond what we've done. Ma'am?
Hi, my name is Sharon Leonard, and I am a teacher here at Sutterville, and I also live in the community. Have raised my children just a few blocks down the street, and now have grandchildren also. And our main way, when we go on field trips either to the golf course, to Fairytale Town, to the zoo, some teachers even go to Funderland, we've always felt that's the safest way to walk. We don't go along the no sidewalk streets where there's you take your life in your hands crossing over by Laboo in that area. So we've always felt that way, but I will tell you, all the years I've been here taking children on field trips that way, we still have always felt very, very unsafe. I mean, I literally have had to get in the middle of the intersection there at Mead and Sutterville to cross. I have to stop the cars so my students can cross. And Dave, I really, really appreciate you being proactive and sharing with us what you've already done. Really, that touches us. However, I feel like more definitely needs to be done. If we have these areas where we're just where we can stop, that's fine for a single person, for maybe a mom and a child, which you'll see frequently going like Talyn was sharing. But when we're crossing, there are so many family events, so many weekend events, so many racing, everything. People are crossing there nonstop. We need more. And I was thinking over in the pocket area, Greenhaven, when you get off 43rd, turn right, and you're heading down to Florin, so it's Riverside and Florin, there's the senior place, and they put in a light where the seniors can cross, kind of like where Baskin and Robbins, that area, the old Nugget, it's now Grocery Outlet, but the seniors can press a button, and then the only time that light is activated is when they're crossing the street. And I think that's, even though we have a shorter distance here, crossing the street, because there's so frequently a lot of people crossing at the same time. I mean, they'll park people will park in the neighborhood to go to events, and so frequently, it's that area by the golf course where events are taking place. And so that's why that traffic is very, very high on weekends in particular. But I really encourage you to look at doing something like that. So it's not stopped all the time, but you can push it, activate. So on the weekdays, it's not going to be that people aren't going to have to stop that much, but it's still going to save the children, families, older people, dog walkers, and everybody else who's crossing. So that's kind of the light I was hoping for coming here tonight.
Thank you. Anybody on the panel? Anybody want to respond to that? That was more of a statement. Okay. I think you were next in the black, and then we've got blue, and then it was over here. Yes, you ma'am. Do you want to just ask from there?
Yeah, I can ask from there. Monica Robinson, I live on Park Ridge, and we met a few weeks ago, and I appreciate you guys meeting with me. We talked about the complications of that four-way intersection, and I just think if they make it simple, move the crosswalk. Move the crosswalk between Park Ridge and Mead. Then you're not going to have two competing north-south intersections to deal with. So you put it between the two streets, do the intersection like Steve, you were discussing, where you have a pedestrian activated light. Not a suggestion, please stop on a yellow, but a stop your car, just like in front of the zoo. Because what happens, I walk that daily, 6 cars in front of the stop yesterday with my 2 kids and my dog, and then I'm just flailing in the middle of the street yelling at people. So I think that the complications we're discussing could be alleviated just by moving the crosswalk. I definitely say from a Park Ridge perspective, stop sign would be a disaster, but also stop lights that's activated by cars only would be possible. Our street turns into the 405 whenever, for anyone that has LA references, whenever Sutterville's backed up. So that was just one thought, and I thought that maybe might simplify it since that is a complicated intersection. I think people, when they go to the park, they park both on Mead and Park Ridge, so I don't think you would have any issues with traffic.
So you're suggesting a mid-block crosswalk sort of between the two intersections?
Get rid of that one crosswalk
Yeah.
and just move it so that you're only stopping 2 lanes of traffic and not a north to south.
We can definitely look at that. We can look at if that would work, as well as trying to figure out if what the distance would be for the pets to walk to that mid location. And if it is a good solution, we would definitely look at it and see if that would work.
And it's important to think, so some of you have seen really poorly designed intersections where the crosswalk isn't where somebody wants to cross. What do? They cross where they want to anyways. So sometimes those mid-block crosswalks could be effective, but also sometimes people want to go the straightest direction, the most convenience, and they'll cross where they want to. So that's when David talks about looking at it, those are the kind of considerations we take in. But I think that's an interesting idea to consider. Yes, ma'am, in the blue, dark blue.
Yeah. So mine's sort of a comment, and first I just want to point out a couple very obvious things, but I don't know if anyone can find what the max capacity of this room is, but in the other ones, they're usually in these schools about the high 200s, low 300s. And I bet you the enrollment of the school is in around 620, 630. Same thing with Crocker. The point being that the schools were designed for much lower capacity of kids. So the parking lots, all those, you have a lot more kids, a lot more traffic around the schools than what we expected originally. Also, I had the naivety to raise my hand when my kids started school at Crocker to ask where the bus pickups were. We don't have buses for our schools. So again, a normal thing, all of us parents, we have a lot more traffic around the schools because we're all driving our kids to school. Since there are no buses, we don't have that as a resource. And I don't expect either of those things to change. I'm just pointing out that it puts the burden on the traffic engineering about how to do this. And the other thing I want to point out was so my suggestion is, for fun, I read the DMV handbook, and I would suggest that we look into a bike boulevard. And for those who the difference between a bike boulevard and a bike route could be Freeport Boulevard, where the priority is the car. So you're going to be having cars going 30 miles an hour. That's okay. That's the speed limit there. Cars should be able to go 30 miles an hour. But I don't want my kid riding their bike on Freeport Boulevard. I don't want them riding their bike on Land Park. What I would suggest is look at some of these smaller streets, say Mead, somehow get through the park, go to 17th Street, where the traffic is naturally going to be slower, make that a bike boulevard, make there a good way to get across, figure out how to cross Sutterville. But those streets would allow Southland Park to be able to ride their bikes, not near 30-mile-an-hour traffic, and get to the high school and get to the middle school. Because there's no way, there's not enough traffic enforcement. There's never going to be enough people to be watching the streets. But if we could create these bike boulevards where the traffic is naturally slower and that we could get our children over there, that'd be great. I still don't know how we're going to get them over to Crocker. We live very close to Crocker, but we can't ever get our kids to Crocker. You can't cross Land Park, you can't cross Riverside. But again, the bike boulevard type of solution for Jennifer, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. We would love to see something like that for both north-south and east-west traffic to these schools so that we can actually let our kids bike to school. That would be amazing.
That's the way to do bikes on exactly those streets.
So
right, but if we formalize that and make sure that they have the good crosswalks, like right now where we are in Denver.
You have a lot of really good questions. I want to make sure other people get to ask as well.
Right. One last thing. In terms of education, the Bullard thing.
Bulb out?
There was comments on Nextdoor and on Facebook by motorists. They don't know what they are. They're not in the DMV handbook. People are confused by them. I understand shortening them, but with the little spikes, motorists don't know what it means. So for education, if we do something that is well documented, that the motorists, the pedestrians, and the motorists know what it is, we don't need to be affected anything.
Okay, so I'm going to have Jennifer answer this because this is all in her wheelhouse. She helped write the National Transportation Guide on bike and pedestrian improvements. But I will say, while the school district doesn't have buses, the city did partner with RT, and we've seen a huge jump in student ridership. Because of that, I'm not expecting you to put your grade school kids on a bus by themselves, but that is something that we've tried to do to help parents. Jennifer, do you want to try to tackle the boulevard question? And then I think there's a little bit of confusion between what is a painted marker and an actual concrete curb bulb out like you might see in the downtown core.
You're speaking my language. I love bike boulevards, and I think they're wonderful things. So I didn't even know it was in the DMV handbook, so this is pretty exciting. So it's a low-stress bikeway with marked guiding bicyclists. I'd like to say bicyclists of all ages and abilities, whether you're 8 or whether you're 80, your comfort level is nothing. You can feel comfortable using these sort of facilities. We don't currently have one. We have ones that want to be bike boulevards, so I love the concept of that. We're definitely going to take that into consideration, so that it is a network of facilities that your children can use to get to school with controlled crossings. Of course, we always have to find the money to have those controlled crossings so that your 8-year-old, your 12-year-old, your 80-year-old feel comfortable crossing on those streets. Definitely speaking my language is something that I think that if we have the community support and rising for, that we can look at making happen or identifying, or working with you to identify what those are, because you probably know your neighborhood better than I know your neighborhood. And then when I think about the curb extensions, those curb extensions are generally concrete. Bulb outs or curb extensions are the same thing. Basically, the curb comes out into where the parking lane is, so that it slows. It makes the crossing distance shorter for pedestrians, but it also slows turning drivers so that they come into your neighborhood at a more reasonable speed. They're great. Sometimes they get hit, sometimes drivers don't like them, We've tried a couple where we use paint and delineators. Delineators are those plastic vertical elements that often get hit that we have to replace, but they're a low-cost solution instead of doing concrete, because concrete's expensive and often we have to move the drainage and water and stuff. Also, you're talking $75,000. But we're learning on how to better educate our drivers, our bicyclists, and our pedestrians. We are not the social influencers of the city that we think we are. And so despite our lovely videos and our posts on social media, people don't pick them up. So if you follow us, I ask if you share the stuff that we do to help get the word out, because really, we just don't have the influence that you have.
Thank you, Jennifer. Just in the interest of questions, I'm going to try to keep moving. And you were next, ma'am, and then you in the print are next. We have sort of a queue, and I'm doing my best. There's no perfect solution. Do you want to just speak from there? Yeah, thank you.
My name is Jody Ansell, and I've talked to several people about this, and appreciate all the feedback that people have given me and information. Thank you very much. Glad everyone's here. I live very close to the intersection of Sutterville and Mead. I walk, I bike, and I drive a car. And one of the reasons that I really feel a stop light is a really good solution there is because I drive a car. And I did the little volunteer crossing guard thing there last week, or when it was week before. And the vast majority of people trying to cross that street were in cars. And trying to get across that intersection during rush hour, either morning or afternoon, is really, really difficult for the cars as well. And I think that's another reason why we should really be using a stop light.
That's a great comment. And for those of you who want to track this, Morris from our office, you all know Morris Thomas. He works on all of our constituent issues and is doing a great job. He has sign-up sheets here that if you want to follow this particular issue, we can keep you in the loop as this moves on. Ma'am in the blue, do you want to stay there or do you want to?
I'll come to the microphone because I'm not sure I can speak loudly. Thank you everyone for being here. I think it's a really important forum. And my two sons come here, and we come from more Riverside over, and I don't feel like there's a very safe route for us to ride our bikes. And when I was thinking about when my son's old enough to go to Cal Middle, how on earth is he going to get there? Like, I have this dream that I want my kids to be able to ride their bikes to school, and I don't think it's going to happen. I don't feel safe. I would feel safe putting them on a bus and sending them on a bus to Cal Middle, but I'm not. And I think that one of the issues is the E for education needs to be also the adults. You know, the drivers need to have a different focus, and you know, like we all need to get to where we're going safely. Like everyone in your car, on your bike, if you're walking, you know, walking with my kids in the stroller when they were younger in the stroller. Like we all need to get to where we're going, and I've actually stopped riding my bike. I'm scared. And one thing I'd like to mention, I like the idea of the bulb outs, because one thing that I see frequently is people stopping for the pedestrians and then people going around them. I think that's how the kid in Cal Middle got hit, and now there's the different crosswalks and the spikes, so it is safer now on Southland Park for Cal Middle crossing, but you know, to stop people from doing that, and that happens in a lot of different areas. So thank you for the forum.
Thank you for those comments. I don't know if any of you want to respond to that. The Southland Park improvements were led by part of the PTA group at Cal Middle that wanted those improved crosswalks. Sorry, Land Park Drive, thank you. We're looking further too in conversations with LPCA and others about maybe some other improvements to Land Park Drive where it's super wide there. But I think that point about people going around, we did see that sometimes when we were out there that morning. The car would stop, people still wanted to take the right turn, so they just jumped in. And you know, those are the kind of things we're balancing out. But just to give you appreciation for this, there are parents across the city who wish they were sitting in a meeting because they have very similar concerns. And I think what's incumbent on the city is that our planning processes are up to a certain standard. So if we are encouraging biking and walking, we've created the infrastructure. And to those adults, a lot of them, they don't seem as susceptible to education, which is why I believe that enforcement, especially because it's been cut so much, we used to have about 45, give or take, officers doing enforcement 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and it's down to 5 right now. And that's only recently have we gotten those back, because we prioritize violent crime, which is important, over vehicle issues. And so we're pushing to get the people hired to fill those roles, but also one of the things I'm working on, and Captain doesn't know this, but I talked to the deputy chief. If we can, in mid-year, get some money for overtime, there are some officers who probably like to come in and just write tickets. I know tickets are a horrible thing as an American, but we do respond as adults a lot of times to those kind of impulses. If we think that we're going to get in trouble, we behave a lot better because somebody's watching. And so 5 officers for a city our size with the kind of traffic we have and everything else, that's just not enough. And so we need to continue to push from the city council side to get more resources. Violent crime and the suppression of violent crime will always be the #1 mission. But if we can augment that with some traffic enforcement, we have more people getting killed on our streets than killed in homicides. Anything? Yes, absolutely. It's your turn right now. That was my period.
So, last year I went to Cal Middle School with the government class, and we did a traffic survey in front of the school with 13 kids. And I put them at each corner in front of Cal Middle School, and I put a counter out there, and I can count the amount of vehicles that went through in front of the school at drop-off time in the morning. At that time, if I remember correctly, it was about 250 cars went through in a 30-minute period. And if I remember correctly, somewhere about 35 to 45% of the cars that went through were some kind of a violator. On the cell phone, not paying attention, not stopping at the limit line, coming around the corner. So, and I had kids doing this. They were the ones taking the counts. They were the ones watching, going, "Yeah, he didn't stop at the limit line." So we've got a lot of education things to do. So I told those kids to go home and tell their parents what they did and what they saw. And so it was actually kind of funny. We came back and they were talking about how, yeah, mom said she's not getting on the phone anymore. And one of them caught their mom on the phone too. So Mr. Hansen was just talking about the...
I'm going to interrupt you. How many of the citations that could have been written would result in revenue to the city?
I'm not sure exactly how the revenue happens, but we get 0 of it.
We get 0 traffic citation revenue.
Yeah, so every traffic ticket we write...
That's not a way to pay for the officers, just for those who might have thought that.
It goes to the county general fund, and then they distribute it however they distribute it. Yeah, it's part of, some of it goes goofy ways.
Lisa probably knows since she works on the state budget.
The other thing is, Mr. Hansen just said too about the homicides. This year to date, the 4 traffic investigators, detectives, we've had 32 call-outs, which means those were pending fatal, and 26 fatal collisions. That's more than, actually I think homicide just passes up, but we get called out more than homicide does for fatal and high injury collisions. The other part of enforcement too is not everybody responds to getting a citation, because there are times when I've cited the same person 4 days in a row in front of a school or somewhere else for doing the exact same thing. And sometimes it's education and then the engineering that takes part of that too. And we can still take their license away, but someone's still going to give them a car, and then they can come right back and do what they do. So those were the couple things that I wanted to say.
Ma'am, you're next in the print. And then just as a time check, we got 15 minutes. We're going to stick around after that 15 minutes so people can keep asking questions. And I'm going to try to look at hands real quick right after she speaks.
My name's Sabrina Joyce. I live just 2 blocks away, neighbors with the Longs. Thank you for organizing this. You spoke so eloquently. I'm just been in the neighborhood for like a year, so I'm new to this concept of not having sidewalks everywhere. I grew up in the suburbs, and then I lived in big cities for most of my life. And my daughter's only 2, but I'm just wondering, 3 years from now, when we walk to school, we're only 2 blocks away, so to me, the safest route is walking, and the most efficient route. Is there any, I mean, I realize there's private property involved, and that's like the massive issue, but like, is there any way to put in sidewalks, like around the bend? You know, where Monterey and Wentworth and Potrero meet, or, I mean, that's what affects me, but I'm sure there are other areas.
Thank you for that. Much of these neighborhoods were developed when, and maybe Pinky will correct me, when these parts of that are now the city were in the county, and so some of our development standards didn't apply. We generally do that, but to build sidewalks now on properties, the property owners have to get together and want that to make that happen. And I think there's a culture here in South Land Park where people don't necessarily want sidewalks, and I think there's a little bit of a debate to be had about that. But if there's an opportunity for us, in many parts of our district, people want streetlights. One of the few ways to do that is the property owners to vote at 2/3 in their segment to vote for streetlights. I believe that sidewalks are an approved Prop 218 improvement that you could amortize if you wanted the city to help, but the property owners in that vicinity would have to vote at greater than 2/3. That is a great opportunity, though, for me to also recognize we have both Mitch Rohrer here, who's the president of LPCA.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And we have Joe Flores, who's the president of Southland Park Neighborhood Association here, and a park commissioner.
And
So,
if I may, Steve, I just like.
well, you're not next, but okay.
No, I just want to make it sound
Will you rebel if I let him speak?
Yeah. Just a statement that I want to make, and
just quick, because we have people who've been waiting.
No, but the Land Park Neighborhood Association has been working very closely with the city on this matter before this even happened. So we recognize what's going on, the limitations that our neighborhoods and our streets have. This young lady in the blue shirt, I thought, said it made it very well. So we welcome your input and look forward to working with anyone in the neighborhood to help raise awareness to this issue. And we can be reached at info@landpark.org.
And your next meeting is next Wednesday?
Next Wednesday night.
At the Eschaton on Freeport at 6 p.m., right?
Yes.
Okay. 6:30? 6. 6:30. Thank you. It's a team sport. You're next, ma'am? Yes.
Hi, my name is Debbie Seifert, and I have 3 children. One is in college, and I have one in 8th grade at Cal Middle, and one in high school at McClatchy. And basically, it's going to Sutterville. We rode our bikes all the time, walked. It was very safe. And I live right off of Mead in the first cul-de-sac right by Jody and Alena. And my 8th grader saw Alena that morning, and she had crossed just a little bit after her. And she just felt terrible. There was already support there. She had her cell phone with her. She would call. She knew she'd be in the way. There was already help on the way. In fact, I think her dad was the first one to be called. And she, ever since then, has been very scared crossing that crosswalk. She doesn't have my husband and I both leave at 7 in the morning. That's her ride, is to ride her bike there. And so basically, I think it absolutely has to be a stoplight. Police officers probably know this. It's what she says the biggest deal is when she's trying to cross, the blinking lights have helped a lot. However, it doesn't help 100%. One side will stop for her, the other side, they might stop, maybe. Even when she has both sides completely stopped, cars, just like you had mentioned, go around. She could be in the middle of the crosswalk and cars just scoot around. They don't see her. They're always in a big hurry. Honestly, the only thing is that I believe would be a stoplight. I have one at McClatchy. She drives her car to school. She said it's awful for her. She's trying to cross there at that same crosswalk. She's watching the trail of cars just keep going and going and going. She's trying to watch for pedestrians. The other side of the street is when it goes for the golf course, and people are trying to cross right there, plus you have runners going across. So there's 5, 6, 7 things going on as a 16-year-old driver to try to be aware, because the young kid, and it makes me nervous for what happened to him, he was not texting. A lot of 16-year-olds, that's what the first thing that we think of is that they're texting. He was not texting. That light was in his eyes. The blinking light, Alena did all the right things. The blinking light was on. We always try to tell when, hey, you gotta wait till this side and this side to stop, but it's still not 100%. So I am advocating 100% that there absolutely has to be a stoplight.
I'm Kevin Wong. I'm Alena's dad, 37 years old. But and I just want to put this a little into context. So I work downtown. I bike to work every day, and I cross at that very same crosswalk. For me, I mean, I've been driving for a while. I think it's fine for me, but it's not fine for our kids. When Alena started going to Cal Middle at the beginning of the school year, I biked with her for the first week. One big problem is that there is no safe way, I mean, of course, to cross Sutterville, but also just to get to Cal Middle from there. You could go to Land Park Drive, you could go kind of through the park, but there is no good way to get there. And we explored many different ways. The bus solution, I think it's great partnership with SACRT. And there are a few buses that go straight to Cal Middle, but the bus stop is at Sutterville Mead on the other side. And just as Sharon said earlier, there is no other way. You have Del Rio, there's no shoulder, no bike lane, and that crazy intersection. You have Freeport, which we know is way too busy. And so it all points back to Sutterville Mead. And I mean, I agree with many of the comments here that a pedestrian activated stoplight would be the best solution.
Thank you. Got 7 minutes. Let's see what we can get done. I saw your hand. Why don't you go, and then you in the back, ma'am, and then we'll come down to you. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
I'm not sure if I can talk loud enough. I live at Princess Court in Shellwright. And so that's the street right before me, going east, or right after me, going east. And so the problem, I'm echoing a lot of what people said, that I've crossed with my 3-year-old and almost been hit by cars trying to pass on the right. It's a huge problem. And they get used to it, because when you're driving and trying to turn into your street off of Sutterville, that's what cars do. They skirt around you to get to pass you on the right, to get to, beyond. And so they've made it a habit of doing this in other areas along Sutterville. And that always freaks me out, because I'm looking in my rearview mirror and I'm like, I hope the car behind them knows there's a car turning. Because, this person decided at the last second that they're going to pass on the right, so there's more cars funneling down. And it would be great if we could paint the bike lane a color, maybe put some bumps in there, because I just feel like the cars think it's a lane. They think it's a passing lane. I mean, even as many rules as there are, we all should know, you can't pass on the right, but it happens. And I realize it saves time, or it gets them closer to the next, faster to the next intersection. But safety on that street is really poor, and for drivers as well, but clearly for pedestrians crossing and all the other. So I just wanted to add that.
No, it's great. In all this stuff, our staff are taking notes. It really does help. I know you feel like you're being repetitive, but this is the venue to make those statements, to validate what other people have said. Ma'am in the back in the jacket.
I just wanted to say, I do really like the push button activated where the lights flash. The trouble is, unfortunately, as Eric and I have discussed, at least over the last couple of years, hi Eric, they've had it at 7th Avenue, they've had it at 11th Avenue, and now they're putting it at the people don't stop. You can push the button, you can wait for it to be clear at least 3 blocks each direction. And they will still just go almost right in front of you. unless you walk really slowly and make sure that they understand that you are crossing the street. It just seems that, I don't know whether you need some kind of sign up above it that says, crossing traffic must yield to pedestrians or something. Can they get a ticket for going through the crosswalk when you're going, or what? You see a red, though, a red
So
stop.
those ones, like the one at Mead, I'm not a fan of those, and I did a study over at 59th and S Street. SMUD called, and they said all these cars are coming and they're trying to run over our pedestrians. And what happens is people think it's a force field when they hit that button and they see the yellow lights flash and they immediately start crossing the road, and then cars are still flying through. So that's one of them. And the yellow doesn't mean stop. The yellow doesn't mean stop. So you have to enter that crosswalk as a pedestrian when it's safe for you to do so. So when I went out to the SMUD, the 100 people that I watched cross, 85 of them I could have given tickets to for not yielding to the traffic vehicles that were coming through. So not just pedestrians, or not just cars can get citations, but pedestrians can too. So.
But what is the rule about if they go through when you're in the crosswalk?
Those are different. Here, Jennifer, we have a little bit of debate going between the two experts here.
We're talking two different treatments here. What the officer here, Mr. Johnson's talking about is a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which is the two yellow flashing lights. You push the button, drivers are supposed to yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk. What your question about, I think, is the pedestrian hybrid beacon. I know it's technical jargon, sorry guys. The pedestrian hybrid beacon is relatively new to the city of Sacramento. It is a where you have, it's going to call it triangle-shaped yellow, and then two red balls at the top, and it flashes red, and then there's a full red. Is that what you're talking about? No, that is not what you're talking about. There's no red. Okay. We have a third. We have lots of different types of red. The pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is the flashing red to solid red, is a full control, though it is very confusing for drivers. Because they don't know that they can proceed. This is the one time for which they can proceed on a flashing red. Other times you can't.
And that wonderfully underscored how confused drivers can get with all the different signs. Everybody knows what a red, green, and yellow light is. And so that's part of why I think that's coming out as a clear priority. But I'll also tell you, and I know everybody's talking, but hold on for a second. You guys can figure out you can arm wrestle later. I'll put my money on Jennifer.
Two different ones.
As the city council's policy, pedestrians are supposed to be protected. That is the ultimate policy. Pedestrians and bikes, if you have 2,000 pounds of vehicle, you have to be conscientious. You know, we can get into the technical stuff, but the whole point of Vision Zero and better engineering is to make sure if you're without 2,000 pounds of metal, that you're still hopefully safe. And you know, that's a hard thing to achieve in day-to-day life, but our policies are meant to further that idea. It doesn't mean that the pedestrian or the bicyclist or the driver is right all the time, but it means that we're trying to use our engineering options. So here, ma'am, you get the... You might have this.
My question, I actually have kind of a comment question related to education, and that is that I think the classes are fine and great and dandy, but my question is, are there signs or placards that can be placed in the classroom, and what are we doing to educate drivers? Because I am a non-driver. I've never driven in my life. I have a disability. I don't like to talk about that, but I am concerned about the fact that I understand that you are supposed to yield when you're making a right-hand turn off of Wentworth onto Freeport and make sure that the person is through the intersection before you just turn. I was almost hit today because somebody turned right in front of me. So I don't know what the education needs to be, but I think that there needs to be placards in the schools about bike safety, but I also think that stores or other places could have education for drivers about things like what you have to do about yielding and making sure that you stop and making sure that people get across the street safely.
Thank you. As much as it's painful for everyone, I think that that's a great comment to finish on. We're here at 7:30. People aren't going to go away. You've all been wonderful tonight, very engaged. I think this is something that we should all be really proud of, that our communities come together. I want to thank our city staff who joined us tonight. I know they didn't all talk as much as maybe they had hoped to, but I think they listened to a lot of your feedback. I did. I know our school board member did, and we want to do our best to bring this stuff into reality. So thank you for your time. We're going to stick around and talk to you, but have a great night.